We've reached directly and indirectly approximately 35 million people. We've worked with over 100 partners, some of which you'll hear from on this side event session today. Partnerships is incredibly important to the work that we do, and I often think of GDI Hub as the glue in our projects that kind of bring specialists, experts, disabled people together, and you'll hear a bit about how we work in that way today. And we've also raised significant money through particularly match funding to the programs and research and projects that we deliver. Next slide, please. Our mission is quite simple. It's to accelerate ideas into impact for a more just world for disabled people and all people. So, as I said, the Global Disability Innovation Hub is very much focused on driving innovation for disabled people. And that's at the core of all the research and programs and projects that we do. Our vision is for disability inclusion and social justice, and we work towards a world without barriers. And so that's, very pertinent to this side event today, which is going to have a focus on the built environment, the world in where we live, and looking at what we can do to eliminate those barriers that exist in the world in where we live. And you'll hear much more about some of that work that we've been doing in this unique research over these past 4 years. Next slide, please. So the research you're going to hear about from us today falls under a huge research program that GDI Hub leads and delivers on, which is called AT 2030. AT stands for Assistive Technology, and 2030 is to the year 2030. This is a research program that's been running since 2018 and will now run through until the year 2030. And what it does is look to test what works to improve access to life-changing assistive technology, or AT, for all. But we understand that the access to AT is only one part of the puzzle, and that there's a lot more contributes to enabling disabled people to take part in daily life. And part of that is the access to the built environment to allow them to use the AT that they have. Other aspects that we're cognizant of and have been researching include stigma, attitudes, cultural contexts, education, and a lot of that falls under different strands of work under the AT 2030 program. But today we'll be focusing on the inclusive infrastructure research. Next slide, please. So we're going to show a video in a moment, so I'm not going to repeat too much that you'll see in this short video. But needless to say, I think this research that you're going to hear about today has been a privilege to be part of. It's a very unique opportunity to be able to conduct research over 4 years across 6 cities globally in developing countries to really understand how inclusive those cities are or are not, where are the barriers and challenges, but also where are the opportunities and the good examples that we can draw on and share. So all of the reports for each of these cities are available online. I encourage you to find them and read them. Our team, led by Michaela Patrick, has written a comparison report that compares the findings across these 6 cities. And in the very near future, we're happy to announce we'll be publishing what we call our Global Action Report. And essentially what that is a tool. And if you are a city government, if you are a DPO, an individual, if you're looking to make your city more inclusive, more accessible, more climate resilient, then we hope that this document we're going to produce that kind of synthesizes and summarizes this research will be the perfect starting point for you. So we encourage you to reach out to us to learn more. And if you're interested in your city being part of this work, part of this scope, again, do reach out to us and let us know. With that, I'm going to hand back, I think, to Michaela. We're going to show a short film, and I'll leave you in the capable hands of the team and our partners that we've thoroughly enjoyed working with through this research to elaborate. Thank you, and see you later.
Thanks so much, Ian. So while Louise, my colleague, is just queuing up the video, just to say, you'll have seen we have ISL interpretation throughout this session. We also have captioning that you can access. And we're also using the Q&A box. So if any questions do come up that you'd like to ask throughout the session, throughout the different presentations, please do use the Q&A box, and we can try and make sure we have time to take some of those questions at the end of the session. And with that, I will let the video play.
So the UK aid-funded 80-20-30 project looks at AT and essentially getting AT, which is assistive technology, to people who need it. But we recognise that if the built environment, the world in which they live, doesn't allow them to use that AT, then it's redundant. So this sub-programme, this project looks at inclusive infrastructure. So it looks at the inclusive design of the built environment and the world around us.
My name is Michaela Patrick, and I'm Head of Inclusive Infrastructure and Climate at the Global Disability Innovation Hub. So over the last 3.5 years, we've been conducting research in 6 cities around the world, funded by UK aid, to look at the current state of accessibility and inclusion in those cities.
So the 6 cities that this research project focuses in on are Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, Varanasi in India, Surakarta in Indonesia, Nairobi in Kenya, Freetown in Sierra Leone, and Medellin in Colombia.
So our goal with this research was to identify across these 6 cities what are some of the common challenges and shared opportunities for a global movement for inclusive design.
I am Francis Kabia. I am the Director of Social and Religious Affairs, Ministry of Social Welfare, Sierra Leone.
I am Quad Jamil, but people usually call me AA. I'm from Kota Kita, a non-government organization from Solo, Indonesia.
So my name is Utsav, and I'm from New Delhi, India. I represent an organization called the National Institute of Urban Affairs. I am an anthropologist, and I've been working on disability for the last 4 to 5 years.
Mi nombre es María Isabel Aguirre, vengo del Comité de Rehabilitación en Medellín, Colombia. Es una institución que trabaja con población con discapacidad.
My name is Engineer Michael Ochieng Owino. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a Chief Engineer in the Ministry in charge of Housing and Urban Development.
My name's Anne McKinnon. I work for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. To see everybody come together in the same room is fantastic, to share their experiences, to talk about where the common threads are, where the common barriers are. I think what comes out of today is going to be really interesting, and it's certainly going to be able to inform both what's next and other cities around the world in terms of what they can do better and where their barriers might be.
Over half of the disabled people live in the informal set of areas.
Тэгээд энэ гэр оролны орчин нөхцөл нь болохоор хүртээмжийн хувьд ерөнхийдөө огт хүртээмж үүсгэж болно. Дээрээс нь дулаан болон цэвэр усны хангамж одоо яг төвлөрсөн хангамж байхгүй буюу дандаа тийм зөөврийн байдлаар хэрэглэдэг. Дулааныг бол өөртөө гэртээ галдуулах байдлаар ашигладаг.
I'm Dr. D. Vasudevan. I'm the Chief General Manager from Varanasi Smart City. I'm representing Varanasi City in this summit. This very building where we are sitting and having the summit is an excellent example of how inclusive building to be built. It doesn't actually cost much. If you do it, incorporate it in the very design from the beginning, it is, it's very, very marginal expense or negligible additional expense.
My name is Maria Clara Rubla, and I'm a local consultant on the team of Medellin of the Global Disability Innovation Hub. And I believe that Medellin is being kind of a referent. Like comparing Medellin and its dynamics with other cities in Africa and Asia had made me realize that we have gone like first in that path, and we have some interventions and some initiatives that other countries are starting to look at to replicate them in their cities.
It's been a little bit overwhelming, if I'm honest, the past 3 days. It's in a good way, having these representatives from 6 cities from around the world come here to the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, where I worked on the inclusive design, to talk about inclusive design. It's been incredible, an amazing opportunity and experience, and we can't wait to get started now on the final report and get that out.
Brilliant. So we really wanted to show that video just to bring in an understanding of the diversity of partners we've worked with across this research program. It's really been so incredible to work with 11 local partners across the 6 different cities, and you'll have seen most of them there. We're really delighted, though, that today we have 2 of the local partners here with us online to share some reflections from their side on the research. So you've heard a little bit from us about a kind of overview of the research, but we really wanted to bring in 2 of the cities to reflect a bit on what they learned through the process of engaging in this research, both about their city and also about the other cities that they've worked with. So if we could please get the slide deck back up. And it's a pleasure to introduce Maria Clara Arula Palacio from Medellin, Colombia, who's going to give some reflections from the city of Medellin. So Maria Clara, over to you.
Thanks, Meg. Nice to see you again, and nice to see all the team that worked together some months ago. As Micaela said, I'm Maria Clara Rula. I was a local consultant here while doing the research, and I worked together with El Comité, a social corporation that works here in Medellin with and for people with disabilities. So I'm gonna share 3 quick reflections about our opportunity working with other cities and being part of this amazing research. Next slide, please. So first, for all of you who don't know where Medellin is located, we are in Colombia, in South America. We are located in a valley, which gives us a very complex topography, which give us very important challenges to address for people who live there in the periphery of the city, where we have been trying to address that historical debt that we had with people there living and feeling a part of the center of the valley, where all the opportunities, or mostly all the opportunities, are concentrated. We have been over 20 years ago working on innovative processes, trying to change our city from being known as the most violent city to the most resilient city, which is how we are being known recently. And through all these processes, community participation have been something very important. We cannot transform our city without people, and that's something that Medellin have been recognizing through all our processes. Sorry, okay. Now, one of our main challenges after having the opportunity to create new policies, new strategies to address these city challenges is to address and to implement that public policies that we have been creating, and to recognize that accessibility is more than a ramp. We have been able to create some public transport systems, as you can see on the image we are showing in this slide, as the cable car system, which bring people from high hills in the periphery of the city to the center of the valley, different processes that make people have opportunities there in the periphery. But now we need to recognize that attitude and attitudinal barriers is something that people still facing as a challenge, and we need to work towards trying to break those barriers down. So that's something we kind of recognize during this whole process, working with the GDI Hub and in partnership with all the other cities that work together in this research. We were able to recognize Medellin as a city that have been able to overcome many challenges, but that we still having some issues and some challenges pending. Next slide, please. This opportunity of working in this research gave us a very important chance to learn from others. We recognize that even being kilometers apart in different continents, with different cultures, with different ways of doing and understanding things, we have very similar challenges and realities. And that was a very important opportunity to share ideas, to share challenges, to start thinking together about different ways of addressing these challenges, specifically thinking about inclusivity and disability. We were able to share these ideas to try to create a more inclusive world. We also recognize the importance of community participation, which is something that doesn't happen only here in America or in Colombia. It also happens in Africa, in Asia. That's something that we are all thinking. As some people here in our city say, nothing about us without us. That's something we all recognize during this process. We also had the opportunity to recognize that political will is something that we need to still working on. Inclusivity and inclusion, it doesn't depend on one government or one particular party. It's something that belongs to all. And it was very hopeful that we could recognize that together between all of us, we had a joint hope to create a more inclusive world, which was something beautiful, which was something that gave us hope. And it's like the reason why we are still working on these kind of processes. Next slide, please. And lastly, what's next, which is like the main question we are always asking ourselves. It doesn't matter where you are, we are always thinking on what are we going to do next when we finish one project, what are we going to be after that. We need to keep strengthening relationships between community organizations and the public sector. We need to keep giving them more ideas, tools to get a better community participation, to create more innovative processes, more innovative ways of addressing challenges that we have in our city. We need to keep working on accountability and public policy implementation. Here in Colombia, we have plenty of norms, rules, laws, public policies speaking about inclusion, community participation, disability rights, but they are like in many areas, it's difficult for people to understand what kind of things apply in one case or another. So it's a challenge for us in the government, in the public sector, to try to organize that set of tools, norms, laws for people to use them, understand them, and implement them. As I previously said, inclusion does not belong to a particular government. It's a responsibility of all. We cannot think that in our case, in 4 years that we have a city administration running, they are going to work hardly in some aspect, but then the next one forgets about it. We need to keep working on political will so we can trespass those governments and keep implementing what works and keep working in what's missing. And lastly, we need to keep addressing attitudinal barriers. We have some interventions in Medellin particularly that have contributed towards giving a more inclusive city to people with disabilities. But we need to keep working on inclusion is more than a ramp. It's not just having public interventions or infrastructure, which of course is needed and of course is a priority, but we need to keep thinking about education, about training, because in many areas people are not able to attend in a proper way someone with a disability. So we need to move towards these other area or aspects of inclusion and understand what kind of different strategies apart from infrastructure we need to start adding and complementing so we can have a more inclusive city. That was all from Medellin. Thank you all for your attention, and thanks a lot again for having us in this amazing research.
Thank you so much, Maria Clara. It was really great to hear from you and hear some of those reflections from Medellin, which I think are really, really powerful. I'll now hand over to Gloria Tanui to speak about some reflections from the city of Nairobi in Kenya. So our case study in Nairobi was actually delivered by two partners, so Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa and Concui Design Initiative. So Gloria is going to speak today on behalf of Pinkui Design Initiative, but our colleagues from Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa are also in the room and will also be available for questions at the end. So Gloria, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Michaela, and thank you. It's been great working with the GDI team. And as Michaela said, my name is Gloria Tanui, and I work for Concrete Design Initiative, in short KDI. And we're a design and community development nonprofit organization that partners with underserved communities, for example, in informal settlements, to research, test, and develop equitable public spaces and sustainable environment solutions for local communities. So we have offices in LA, Stockholm, and in Nairobi, Kenya, where the case study was carried out. And this was together with our local partner, the Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa. And thank you, it was an honor working with you. Next slide, please. So looking at Nairobi, from the case study, people living with disabilities face a significant urban mobility challenges. For example, when we spoke to one wheelchair users, they struggle with public transport. For example, the matatus, the local public service minibuses often ignore them. And when they're not ignored, they might be even charged double the fare. And this is just one example highlighting the systemic inequality and lack of inclusivity in our transport system. And this is just one example where our infrastructure is lacking in basic accessibility features, which impeds the independence of people living with disabilities. And also, while there are laws that exist that enhance accessibility and protect the rights of people living with disability, their enforcement and accountability is minimal, which also leads to inadequate advocacy and representation of people living with disability in policy making and also infrastructure planning and implementation. Also, additionally, the societal stigma and negative attitudes towards people living with disability really affects inclusivity efforts, on top of corruption and political challenges which hinder the progress of such initiatives, which are meant to improve accessibility, where they are frequently mismanaged or sidelined or even deprioritized. Next slide, please. Despite the challenges, there are spaces in Nairobi that we would also like to celebrate for their inclusivity, and which shows that Nairobi is making strides towards inclusivity. For example, the Nairobi Commuter Rail Service, which offers reliable transport. For example, they even have reserved spaces for people living with disability on the train, and have service providers who are keen on assisting them find their way through the station as well as through their travels. And on top of this, efforts are also being boosted by the civil society, growing advocacy for better enforcement of accessibility laws. And we can clearly see also some improvements within the central business district, where there's the proposed bus rapid transport system. And there've also been electric buses that have been coming up that are disability friendly, which shows that the public transport system is improving in terms of inclusivity. Additionally, when we look at the tech scene, there are initiatives like the Innovate Now Accelerator Program, the Kenya Innovate Week, which are advancing assistive technologies and integrating accessibility into Nairobi's urban development. And we also can't forget the community-driven projects, which also ensure the local needs of people living with disabilities are met. And they also foster a strong sense of community and involvement and commitment to inclusivity. Next slide, please. So even as we consider the future of inclusive infrastructure in Nairobi, it's important that we reflect on the lessons that we learned from the other cities around the world through the comparative review. And we gained insights that really underscored the transformative power of community and policy-driven driving substantial changes within inclusivity in the built environment. For example, from Medellin, we observed the effectiveness of community-driven planning and development. And the city has shown engaging local communities in the planning process not only fosters a sense of ownership, but it also leads to solutions that are deeply rooted in local contexts and needs. And from Freetown, we learned that the power of civil society organizations in driving policy changes and pushing the government's commitments to translate into action. And this cross-learning and collaboration has been a pivotal theme. And sharing knowledge and experience across this city has not only enriched our understanding, but we believe that it will catalyze innovation in tackling common challenges across the cities. And in Nairobi, these global insights, they remind us of a critical need for intersectional design and the immense value of integrating diverse perspectives as we pursue creating an inclusive urban environment. Next slide. So looking at the lessons from Medellin and Freetown, right now Nairobi faces challenges and opportunities, especially following the recent flooding, the riparian zones and demolitions in informal settlements. And these events underline the urgent need for interventions in the riparian lands and flood-prone zones. And it also presents a unique opportunity to rethink how we develop our urban environment through the lens of inclusivity and climate resilient design. And from the study, some of the priorities we identified were ensuring infrastructure provides safe and independent access for all. And especially, this is crucial, especially during disasters. And also engaging communities in the planning process to ensure the solutions are sustainable and tailor-made for the local needs. Also looking at incorporating possibly nature-based solutions to enhance climate resilience and also enhance the urban landscapes. And when you look at funding, also committing to strategic and long-term investments in infrastructure would go a long way in supporting resilience and inclusivity. And as we do so, we have to maintain focus on providing accessibility for all members of the community to benefit from these improvements. And with the ongoing current, social and affordable housing projects, as well as the buzz around the riparian zones, these are opportunities to demonstrate inclusive and resilient design principles through their development and rebuilding strategies. So in conclusion, to move forward, we must test and gather and develop prototypes that showcase the effectiveness of inclusive and resilient designs in improving the quality of life and urban durability. And these efforts will pave the way for more inclusive and resilient cities, including Nairobi. Thank you. Over to you, Michaela.
Thank you so much, Gloria. That was really, really great to hear from Nairobi and some of the specific insights to that city, and also many that I think are shared across many of the cities as well. I'm now delighted to introduce one of my colleagues at GDI Hub, Anna-May Muldowney, who's an inclusive design assistant with us, and she's going to talk a bit about visualizing inclusive design challenges. So over the course of this research, we've really realized that to engage with the audiences necessary to ensure that we have maximum impact with this evidence and ensure that we drive action with the research that we're conducting, we need to communicate that research in different ways. And one of the ways that we've been exploring that is through visual tools, which Anna-May is now going to talk us through. These drawings are brand new. This has never been shown before, and these will be published in the reports that are going to be published very soon, most likely in July this year. So with that, Anna-May, over to you.
Thanks, Michaela. So if you could just flick to the next slide and possibly the one after that. So you can skip this one because Michaela gave me an excellent intro. So we began to explore this area through a gap we saw in how we package our research, as Michaela has just explained, so for delivery to multiple different audiences. So we have an abundance of study data from the research, from photo diaries, interviews, participatory workshops, priority setting workshops, and journey mapping. And we've been communicating these in ways such as reports, blogs, journal articles, news reports, and different various types of interviews. And this has been reasonably successful as we target audiences such as the general public, government stakeholders, built environment professionals, and entrepreneurs and different designers. However, we felt that there was a gap in how we not only get this information out there, but also how we allow people to engage and imagine the barriers and good examples we want to showcase. So next slide, please. So we found that a key aspect of this was looking at how built environment professionals communicate their designs, both between themselves and to their clients. We felt that to fully engage with people at the heart of designing our built environment, it was important to embed their methods, such as technical drawings, architectural representations and renders, with representations and scenes of lived experience of people with disabilities. Next slide, please. So, as an architect myself, I recognize that built environment drawings often lack diverse representation, clarity, because they often have poor color contrast and complicated compositions, and are often inaccessible for people with visual impairments. So realize that improving that could create drawings that more people could interact with and interpret, allowing greater capacity for diverse leadership and input into design stages, greater consideration for the needs of disabled people. As if you see a person facing a barrier in a drawing or representation, you're more likely to solve that in your design. And also an excitement about creating innovative and beautiful inclusive environments. So we've seen in sustainable and climate related aspects becoming very popular in design and creating a lot of traction. But how can we make it so inclusive design has the same momentum? Next slide, please. So to begin to address this, we began drawing out and representing lived experiences using photo diary images re-represented in an architecturally drawn scene with participant quotes and labeling key points. So it allowed us to bring our research all into one piece of work. So in this slide, you see an example of this. On the left, a photo diary image of a wheelchair user being lifted over an open drain by two people. And then on the right, an architectural representation of this image, which begins to explain what's going on in this photo diary image. So it explains how physical barriers such as this can render programs such as free or affordable healthcare completely inaccessible to people with disabilities. So next slide, please. As our research took place across 6 cities, we began to paste these scenes, as seen in the last slide, together in the architectural context of the cities, as each of the cities is quite different. They were found to begin to create a picture of barriers to inclusion, as well as good practices within a moment of time in the city. So the image shown here is a working drawing showing a collage of images from Nairobi in Kenya, one of our cities, and below it a sketch of how we might begin to compose that as an architectural drawing. Next slide. Next. So this stage resulted in line-drawn architectural section drawings that cut through the city, albeit imagined instead of exact, to allow multiple aspects to be included in a smaller drawing that we could add to our reports. So in this slide, you see a representation of the city of Medellin in the lower half, with scenes pulled out representing moments of and barriers to inclusion. So I'll get into more detail now on the next slide. So here are those scenes that were pulled out magnified, and they pinpoint certain aspects. So in image 1, it shows a wheelchair user having to travel on the road with vehicles due to a lack of accessible footpaths in periphery areas in Medellin, highlighting issues surrounding topography and informal development. In the next image, it shows a cable car operator slowing down a cable car for a wheelchair user to board the cable car. So this showcases how built-in inclusive features and effective staff training, as mentioned by Maria Clara earlier, can help create inclusive in transport realms. And then in the next image, we have a man with a hearing impairment confused when other passengers alight from a train during a breakdown. And due to a lack of visual information displays, there's no way for him to know what has happened or why there has been disruption to the service. So this demonstrates the invisible or intangible barriers to inclusion for people with hearing impairments, which are often overlooked in built environment drawings and standards. And then in the final image, image 4, it shows a woman using a pilot of a third wheel attachment, which is begun in Medellin, for her wheelchair as a public bike type system. And this shows how innovative disability-led initiatives in the city need to be integrated into urban planning to ensure first to last mile connectivity. So this drawing and the drawing on the previous slide is just a preview of how we can begin to communicate this research in our upcoming report. And we acknowledge that these drawings, as Michaela said, while a step in the right direction, are still missing some aspects of full inclusion themselves, as improved clarity and accessibility for people with visual impairments could be improved. We hope to continue to iterate them and develop an inclusive communication method that can be replicated by built environment professionals. And we're always happy to hear from any input as how we can achieve this. So that's all from me on this, and hopefully you'll see more in the report.
Thanks so much, Anna May. That was fantastic. We're really excited to get feedback on this piece of work, because we think it's going to be really important for engaging that urban sector in this work. But it is very much also an evolving piece of work. So curious to hear feedback and comments as the items get published. I'm now going to just spend a few minutes reflecting a bit on some of the key priorities that have come out of the research and what's next. So next slide, please. So just to kind of reflect a bit on what we've learned over the last 3-4 years across the 6 cities that we've worked in, we've really earned a huge amount. Of course, this research was also conducted in the midst of a global pandemic, requiring a lot of adaptation and flexibility to do so safely and inclusively throughout. So it's really been an incredible experience, and everything we've learned from all of the local partners has really been invaluable throughout. So this is just a small snapshot of what we've learned. There's much more that is contained in the global comparison report, which we've mentioned, which will be published in July this year. So firstly, I just wanted to touch on the importance of partnerships and local knowledge. We couldn't have delivered this research without all of the local partners that we've mentioned throughout this session. Learning from them, adapting the research to the local context has been such an interesting and invaluable experience, and really an important part of the research process, making sure that the tools and methods that we're using are always adapted to the local context. While each city is unique, there are also common challenges that are faced. Our cities are all at different stages of their journeys in terms of being more accessible cities, but they're all still experiencing challenges. As Maria Clara said, there's always a what next, there's always more that we can do. But what we're striving to kind of balance with our research and with these final reports is that we want to discuss those common challenges, common opportunities, but also demonstrate how they need local solutions. So that localization aspect is always going to be critical. Next, at whatever stage of journey a city is at, sharing best practice and innovation is always useful. And the learning that we've had across the 6 cities, having the opportunity to have these 6 cities together in one room to discuss the challenges that they're facing, has just been invaluable. We also have learned, or I would say we have confirmed, that engaging people with disabilities in city design is hugely valuable and has huge opportunities, and I would say is still an untapped resource in terms of urban planning and urban development. You know, urban projects where people with disabilities have been involved are going to be more inclusive and accessible, and are going to have benefits for the city as a whole, making cities that everyone can thrive in. In terms of next steps, we learned a lot about policies. A lot of the cities that we work in do have policies in place, but what we often find is that there's an implementation gap. So one of the areas of kind of further research is to really look at that implementation process and ensuring that policies and strategies that are developed actually end up with results on the ground. We also need to consider inclusive design and accessibility among other urban development and global challenges, such as climate change and you know, many other global challenges that we're facing. That's something that we're going to touch on more in the next sessions. But I think too often we find that accessibility is considered quite a siloed sector, let's say, of urban development, when in fact it needs to be cross-cutting across urban sectors to have the impact that we want it to have. And then lastly, we've learned about the value of communication tools and methodologies to enact change, which Anna-May has just shared. Next slide, please. So moving forward then, there are obviously always evolving priorities with the research. And as we shared in the video, this was really quite a unique piece of research, quite foundational research to look at the state of inclusion and accessibility in cities around the world in a comparative way for one of the first times. But we now have new priorities and growing areas that we want to explore. So one of these is the kind of evolving intersection of inclusive infrastructure and climate change, which is really a critical area to explore as climate change continues to impact our cities and built environments around the world. We need to ensure that it doesn't create or worsen the accessibility crisis in cities, which is arguably a real risk today. And we're delighted to have C40 Cities speak in a moment to talk a little bit about their work in this space, because something that we also realize and really recognize is that we want to work in partnership. We can't work in silos. We want to share our data. So to have other organizations that are also engaging in these topics is really exciting for us to see. We'll also be deep diving into implementation challenges through doing some pilots over the next couple of years. So we're looking to work in cities to actually test some of the findings of the Global Action Report and, both enact that change through working with the city, but also learn more about what those implementation challenges are and how we can continue to support cities to become more inclusive. Influencing the sector is really critical, so creating change among urban development professionals, including things like awareness on accessibility, disability, inclusive design, having training, and so on. And I think some of these visual tools and other methodologies are part of that. So starting to look at how we can train more of the workforce to be inclusive designers as well. Continued engagement of people with disabilities in cities is always going to be one of our really high priorities. I'm not going to say too much on that because our colleague Hannes from World Blind Union is also going to reflect on this in a moment. And then, as I said, continuing to work in partnership and always kind of evolving and testing our methods. So there'll be more sort of practical tools and kind of action plans coming over the next couple of years. On screen, we just have an image here of one of the tools developed under 80-20-30 by one of our partners, Kotakita, which is using Lego to look at developing co-designing built environment solutions. Next slide, please. So in terms of what's next, as I've mentioned kind of throughout, the final reports are coming really, really soon. So that'll be a kind of research overview, comparing the 6 cities, and a global action report, which is really a much more practical toolkit to work with cities and city stakeholders to enact change. We're really happy to share as well that 80-20-30's funding has been continued for another 5 years under our UK aid funding. So starting now, we have kind of new work streams that are continuing and also building new areas of work. So the inclusive infrastructure work is continuing through these pilots and implementation research that I've mentioned. But we will also have a dedicated stream looking at inclusive climate infrastructure. And we're also adding a gender work stream that is cross-cutting across the 80-20-30 program. So that doesn't just apply to our infrastructure work, but to all of the work on assistive technology across the program. So there'll be some really exciting things there. Then just lastly, for anyone engaged in urban topics, we're looking ahead to the Road Towards World Urban Forum in Cairo in November 2024, which is a really important event to engage the kind of urban sector in this work. And we want to make sure that the data is out there, that we're able to share some of the new tools that we have and so on, and meet other cities and stakeholders at World Urban Forum to continue to further the work and do more as well. So that's it from me for now. I think I'll just end there by saying thank you to all the partners that we've worked with. It's really been a joy over the last couple of years to work with everyone. Now I'm really happy to pass over to friends at C40 Cities to talk a little bit about their work in climate action in cities. So I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Adam Pollard and Louisa Miranda Morel to present their work. So over to you, Adam and Louisa.
Thank you, Michaela. I'm going to go first, and then Adam will come in a moment. So it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation and allowing us to speak alongside you. I'm the Senior Manager for Inclusive Climate Action for Breathe Cities, a partnership program between C40, Clean Air Fund, and Bloomberg Philanthropies. I have brown hair, I have green eyes, and I'm wearing a light blue shirt. For those that don't know us, C40 is a network of mayors of nearly 100 world-leading cities collaborating to deliver the urgent action needed right now to confront the climate crisis. And because we know that together we can create a future where everyone, everywhere can thrive. And we have two main missions. So if we can go to the next slide, please. The first mission is to help get the world off fossil fuels in order to halt the climate breakdown. And the second mission is to address the impacts and injustices of climate breakdown. Next slide, please. However, we also know that as the ecological transition is happening, if we want to implement bold climate action, if our mayors want to implement bold climate action to transition urgently and as effectively as possible, this action needs to be supported, it has to have wide consensus, and it has to be socially accepted. And this cannot happen if it is not inclusive and delivering equitable benefits that leave no one behind. So this brings me to why we are so happy to be here today and join everyone online, because we know that leaving no one behind in a rapid and inclusive transition means ensuring that the intersectional challenges experienced by disabled people are recognized and addressed. Next slide, please. Recognizing this fact, C40's first steps in supporting cities to do this has included developing a resource pack. Currently on the slide, this resource pack is represented, and it comprises of a fact sheet about how you make the case at a city level for disability inclusion, and 3 policy papers on mainstreaming disability inclusion across policy action in key climate sectors, specifically public and active transport and mobility, the energy transition, and resilience to extreme climate events. And we identified these sectors because in consultation with city teams and experts, we recognize that they offer significant opportunities to achieve ambitious climate targets, but also, importantly, they've made abundantly clear that they are key to ensuring that there is transformative change for the inclusion of people with disabilities in this transition. And this is just a baby step. It's a baby step that has made abundantly clear that key to taking any further steps, we have to keep showcasing the firsthand experiences, voices, data, and evidence base to motivate the necessary collaborative partnerships that ensure meaningful, inclusive decision-making on key areas of climate policy. So my colleague Adam will share 2 examples where great strides could be made additionally at the synergy between technology and the supporting and enabling infrastructural environment in cities. And this is not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because without this, as Adam will show, We and cities will miss a significant opportunity for a great number of people to be part of the change that is necessary to deliver the ecological transformation of the built environment. So Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Louisa. I'm Adam Pollard. I'm Head of Analytics at C40 Cities. My interest in this field stems mainly from my having cerebral palsy. So Louisa mentioned a transition, and key to this transition is ensuring services are as accessible as possible. However, companies are becoming, for example, more remote with their operations. You've just got to think of internet banking, call centers, internet companies. A lot of them are becoming more and more remote. You can partly understand this because services strive to be as streamlined as possible for the balance sheet and for shareholder value, yet they need to remain accessible, so attention is evolving. Take call centers, for example, telephone queuing systems. Yes, they might be more cost effective than a high street branch that you can pop into. Websites and apps are fantastic for the majority, but how easy are they to navigate for people with dexterity issues on keypads? Countless times I've got my fingers jumbled up and gone on this loop, taking me back to the previous menu if calls or not, if I don't press the right answer as quickly as what they need. Is this access designed with profits or the consumer in mind? Then there is the level of awareness amongst call handling staff. How many companies have a generic tick box approach to training staff? Too often when calling in, I'm unable to make a point or finish a sentence, or told, write this down. I can't write. So, dealing in solutions rather than problems. For example, an easy solution would be to open a conversation with, do you have any impairments I need to be aware of? What is your preferred mode of communication? Simple adjustments. Or to provide a person with a disability with a telephone number, which, if it is abused, can be withdrawn. And it would be good if, in some circumstances, conversations could be followed with an email or letter summarizing the telephone call in layman's terms. Not cost effective, but sometimes necessary. Bear with me. Next page, please. So, linking this back to climate change, environmental matters, and accessibility, phasing out fossil fuels is where we need to aim societally. In the UK, for instance, there are schemes to help residents install heat pumps, solar panels for citizens with significant mobility issues and who can afford to do so. It's possible to access an electric vehicle as public transport might not work for us all. However, as I've found out to my cost, charging an electric car requires an significant forward planning. Where is the nearest available charger? Which company owns the charger? Do I need to register with that company? More apps. Once I park my car by the charger, can I maneuver around it? How accessible is support if I need it? At a petrol station, there is normally staff on site. Is it me? Is it my capability level? Well, I've got a PhD in engineering, yet recently was stranded at a charging station because of its usability. If I can use the over-complex charging network and the associated apps, will an 85-year-old driving their first electric vehicle? I know I'm generalizing, but I'm making an example. When traveling alone, public transport isn't always an option for me. So driving, sometimes I have no alternative. Generally, do we retrofit inclusion too often? When designing new technologies, how widely do we consult? If we can't find a solution, is it a case of, oh well, too bad, we have an audit trail to say we tried? So things about the charging network for electric cars. The idea would be to have one charging company. If we got over an app, one app, no pre-registration, and have it working off a bank card. Ideally, we would be able to book ahead and reserve a charging berth for 20 minutes charging. Why not have dedicated charging berths for people with disabilities? And or does commercial opportunity trump access and usability for car chargers? Back to Louisa.
Thank you, Adam. Next slide, please. So these lived experiences, among many others, demonstrate that even where assistive technology does exist, if the social infrastructure in place is inadequate, not only do we inhibit the transition within the physical environment, in this case, in the energy transition and electric mobility, but also we push for more sustainable mobility, energy, and waste management choices without the supportive infrastructure to allow those choices to be made easily. So we must ensure that any shifts and changes are accompanied with the appropriate inclusive physical and social infrastructure to support the behavior change, which is crucial for local governments and mayors that rely on their residents to support the transition. WHO states that about 16% of the global population experience a significant disability today. And that number is growing because of among many other things, an increase in non-communicable disease, and people are living longer. So the rationale to ensure disability inclusion in this way is done within the climate transition is not only about building support and leaving no one behind, it's also logical. It's intelligent urban policy making and planning for the future. So recognizing this, and that said, the next steps in this direction for C40 include, and working with Adam, Dr. Adam, who is the head of analytics at C40, include understanding how to leverage big data to identify and evidence the associations between air quality and climate risks, inequality, and health at neighborhood and intersectional levels, because that is a big ask from the cities that we are working with. And for us, answering this question is critical to informing the design of transformative infrastructures, technology, and innovations, as well as driving more inclusive and systemic change in city governance policy-making mechanisms to ensure disabled people's voices are heard in decision-making. Thank you that's it from us. That's where we're heading soon, and very excited to connect and continue the conversation with everyone online. Thank you very much. Back to you, Michaela.
Thank you so much, Louisa and Adam. Really fantastic presentation and fascinating to sort of hear both big picture questions and policy papers that really have global relevance, as well as the on the ground practical examples and solutions that we need. So thank you so much for that. Now, last but not least, I'm delighted to introduce our final speaker from World Blind Union, Hannes Julin-Lagrulius, who is going to talk a bit about the importance of engaging people with disabilities and organizations of persons with disabilities in urban development. So, Hannes, the floor is yours. And I think Hannes doesn't have slides, Louise, so we could maybe stop sharing while Hannes speaks.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Michaela. Thank you, everyone. Amazing presentations, very insightful, and thank you so much for inviting me on behalf of the World Blind Union, where I coordinate our global program for inclusive and accessible urban development, to just share a few reflections during today's events. I will sort of zoom in and zoom out a bit at the same time, so bear with me, and I apologize I don't have a PowerPoint for today. But just to start, and of course, I will talk about participation, but that will be one of the points later on, because we are currently observing major global trends of urbanization, of climate change, growing vulnerability, but also increasing barriers and heightened discrimination experienced by the diversity of persons with disabilities. We recognize that urgent action is needed to accelerate the implementation of the CRPD, and particularly Article 9 on accessibility, to ensure comprehensive accessibility across the physical environment, transportation, information and communication technologies. And truly, global aspirations to leave no one behind and to achieve the SDGs must truly be translated into local action to ensure that the CRPD obligations are met. There is progress, but this is slow. This is something I highlighted during the beginning of this week, where I participated in the pre-launch of the upcoming Disability and Development Report from the United Nations. So progress is slow, but not necessarily due to a lack of policies or frameworks, but of such being implemented, enforced, and with participation of persons with disabilities at its very heart. This made the World Blind Union to a few years back engage around urban development to influence dialogues, policies, and frameworks and practices guiding urban development at all levels, making sure that our global membership, the World Blind Union is a member-based organization, and also other organization persons with disabilities, OPDs, have a seat at the table, and that considerations for disability inclusion, accessibility, and universal design are truly accounted for in the implementation of the New Urban Agenda, together with the SDGs and other frameworks. Building on this, I just want to talk quickly around the importance of localization, which is now increasing. And truly adopting a localization approach is to translate the global frameworks we have into specific contexts, recognizing local priorities. Effective localization involves co-designing inclusive and accessible policies, programs, and infrastructure, and ensuring active participation of all persons with disabilities in policy and decision-making processes. OPDs are indeed key stakeholders in localization efforts of the global frameworks and the CRPD, because they represent the disability community. Talking about participation of persons with disabilities and OPDs, it's always critical, we have learned, to remind ourselves what is an OPD and what does the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities say an OPD is. And this can be found in the general comment number 7 of the CRPD, because we have noted that many times there is a lot of confusion. OPDs can provide truly valuable insights into the specific accessibility barriers that persons with disability face in our daily lives, in cities and urban communities, but can also work with local authorities to develop solutions that are tailored to truly address these barriers. You know, moving beyond that we assume that some groups need some extra support or some accessibility features, but rather to work with that group. They can also mobilize the community to increase the level of participation in local decision-making, helping to ensure that the diversity of voices, experience, and expertise of the diversity of persons with disabilities are truly informing policies, including in urban planning and design. Considering this, I wanted to highlight some key learnings when it comes to inclusive and effective participation of persons with disabilities, which we included in the World Blind Union's recent report, where we capture our journey for the last few years, being new in the urban development field as a global organization of persons with disabilities. In this report, you can find as the newest news item on the World Blind Union's website. During our work, pivotal learning emerged that on the engagement of persons with disabilities, that it's indispensable to shape inclusive urban development, including around climate action and building urban resilience. This aspect stands out as one of the most critical elements in building cities that are truly inclusive and resilient for everyone. Our experience reveals that persons with disabilities are often left out of crucial discussions and decision-making processes concerning urban communities. Although globally, organizations are increasingly engaging OPDs, but often such engagement is either under-budgeted or not budgeted at all, or just considered a tick-the-box exercise, without clear strategies on how to cultivate results of such engagements. To create inclusive and resilient cities is not just about securing seats at the table, but it's about having a space in the kitchen where collaborative solutions are crafted together. For meaningful engagement to yield tangible actions, involvement of both local and regional governments and the diversity of organizational persons with disabilities as recognized stakeholders is paramount. While local governments play a crucial role in implementing the CRPD, OPDs must not only engage actively, but also be engaged proactively. This recognition positions OPDs to work collaboratively with local and regional governments, contributing their expertise, experiences to co-create effective solutions which actually work. This dynamic is essential for informing urban planning and design, ensuring that such authentically meet the requirements and needs of the diversity of persons with disabilities. For OPDs, this might include working across disability groups, aligning agendas, but also adopting a holistic approach to accessibility, and also to find joint entry points to work closer with their respective local governments. For local governments, in turn, they need to construct avenues which are constructive for dialogue, exchange, and collaboration from policy processes, but also when it comes to specific project implementation. It's worth highlighting that we have observed a tendency of many stakeholders taking quite siloed approaches to accessibility, as was highlighted before by Michaela, I believe. But we have also observed siloed approaches when we discuss the global frameworks and agendas, not recognizing that the CRPD, together with the New Urban Agenda and the SDGs, are working in tandem. They are mutually enforcing. And this siloed approach can also be found when we talk about disability inclusion, where many organizations focus on important but traditional topics such as education and health, but maybe not necessarily recognizing the interconnectedness with accessibility. For instance, we can build an amazingly inclusive school, but we also need to consider the travel journey. How do we ensure that that is also catering for our accessibility requirements? So during COSP and the high-level political forum last year, the World Blind Union and partners published a policy brief on localization to solve the accessibility crisis we observed. And And the policy brief encompasses recommendations around the role of local and regional governments, OPDs, and intersecting groups to achieve more accessible and inclusive infrastructure and services across urban and rural areas. I'm trying to fast track because I know we're running out of time. So following this brief, which I highly recommend that you browse, we are working to better understand and map today globally how local and regional governments are addressing accessibility and how they engaged with the constituency of persons with disabilities in intersecting groups. So during the SDG Summit last September, we launched a global survey together with the United Cities and local governments, with who is gathering more than 240,000 municipalities around the world. The first phase of the survey, which has completed, is interrogating if and what policies or strategies exist in cities to address accessibility, either as part of overall frameworks or as standalone strategies or policies. How cities coordinate accessibility work, if it's through a designated office, departments, or other coordination mechanisms. The mechanism used to actively involve OPDs, for example, across town halls, public consultations, advisory groups, committees, project groups, or as project partners. It also inquires about the frequency of such engagement. A notable element, however, of the survey is on the thematic focus of engagement. It inquires about on what issues local governments are working with the constituency of persons with disabilities, ranging from disaster risk reduction to climate action to ICTs, social services, healthcare, housing, and not least urban planning and design. As I mentioned, the first phase of the survey has been closed, and we're working now on in the analysis phase and follow up to collect more information on the reported practices. Likely, the first phase will gather comprehensive results from around 30 local and regional governments. It became clear during the survey process that it varied among cities, the process itself, and of course the practices, with some using it to foster interdepartmental collaboration, while others seek assistance to ensure comprehensive completion. Notably, the survey has sparked inspiration in some cities, leading to that some cities and associations of local governments are exploring how to develop universal guidelines for the localization of the CRPD. We are taking an incremental approach to this initiative to dig deeper into practices, potential follow-up service, and potentially also reopening the first phase of the survey to collect more city experiences. We view it as a learning and learning collection process, which is necessary to be, of course, continuous. The plan to delve deeper into the experiences engagement of World Blind Union's members and other organization persons with disabilities with their local governments and accessibility initiatives is part of our roadmap. This entails gathering best practices, identifying pilot initiatives, while developing a second phase of the survey, specifically targeting our membership and organization of persons with disabilities, and with the objective to comprehensively map the status of their engagement, their involvement with local governments around accessibility. And by combining the findings and practices with the first part of the survey, which targeted local and regional governments, we believe that the resource produced will help provide actionable insights, supporting ongoing initiatives to support and foster collaboration between cities and organizational persons with disabilities. We hope to disseminate and discuss the results later this year, not least during the upcoming 12th session of the World Urban Forum, which Michaela also spoke about before. And I just want to finish by calling on you all to join us at the World Urban Forum to continue these discussions. And last but not least, I think one critical thing I have carried with me throughout our programming journey from the side of the World Blind Union is, as Clara Marie, you highlighted before, that we have to always be clear that to progress on accessibility, it requires a holistic perspective. Accessibility is so much more than ramps, but also that there are, so to say, misconceptions in the urban development sector of what accessibility is. which goes in line with my previous comment, that proximity or general usability or general access is the same accessibility. And I think we all have to be champions in this, in disseminate and unpack what accessibility means and what it means to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannes. Really brilliant contributions and lots of food for thought. And I echo the sentiment to join us at World Urban Forum if urban topics are of interest to you. So to just wrap up really quickly, first and foremost, I just want to thank all of our speakers. Fabulous presentations. We've had some really, really interesting insights, both from kind of global perspectives, thematic perspectives, and specific local perspectives, which is really brilliant and really what we wanted to see today. We've talked about a lot of different themes, and I think Hannes said it well to kind of conclude by saying what we really need is a holistic approach. So inclusive design and accessibility are topics that cut across urban development, cut across diverse global challenges, and they really need to be something that are integrated into all development projects from the outset. Because what we don't want to see, and if we can be really ambitious, what I would like to see in the future is that we no longer end up in a situation where we're retrofitting accessibility or inclusion, as Adam shared, but it's there from the outset. It's co-designed with people with disabilities to make sure that the world that we live in is both accessible and inclusive for everybody, but also resilient and sustainable well into the future, because actually accessibility is a part of resilience and a part of a more sustainable future for us all. So with that, I will end here. If anybody wants to reach out, you can find GDI Hub's contact details on our website. You can also reach out through the organizers of the event who you'll have received your links to join from. And we're very happy to speak more with everyone who would like to be part of this journey with us as well. So with that, thank you so much and have a good rest of your day or evening, depending on where in the world you are. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.